Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us here for our first kickoff support group meeting for the new academic year on this National Day of Truth and Reconciliation. My name is Kim, and I'm going to be moderating tonight's event, and we've got some incredible panelists both here in person and online, and are so excited to see many of you here, and I'm sure more will filter in as we get started. Just a reminder as we go into tonight is another Ask Me Anything. We got so much interest and enthusiasm. We left the session in May with a lot of energy and saw there were a lot of questions we weren't able to get to. So tonight we want to make sure we can dive into more of those. And those questions can really span whether it is you got IBD, Crohn's, ulcerative colitis, a J pouch, stoma, many of the above, one or none of the above. Perhaps you're a caregiver to someone. All questions certainly are valid. And it was really great to see the courage from some of you last time and really getting into some topics that can be a little bit more difficult to ask about, but are critical to make sure you can move through all assets and facets of your life. So for tonight, we are going to ask that if you've got a question, please either raise your hand virtually or throw that question in the chat, and I will start to get to those and make sure we can answer as many as we can. To those of you that are going to be answering questions, we're looking for headlines, not Sunday editions. And of course, we're trying to keep this broad and general for as many folks as possible. And then to those panelists, I'm going to ask that if you want to answer the question, if you're virtual, please just literally throw up your hand. And then if you're in person, throw up your hand so we know who to take the computer to. We can answer that. First, the thing I want to tackle here is a land acknowledgement, knowing that, of course, today is National Truth and Reconciliation Day. But before we do that, we're actually going to start with intros from our panelists. We're going to keep this short and sweet to the high-level details you think our audience members might need to know about. So actually, Kevin and Wendy, can we start with you? Please unmute yourselves, guys.
Hi, I'm Kevin.
I'm Wendy.
I've had both a pelvic pouch for 10 years and over 20 years now, permanent ileostomy. And I'm just here because life is awesome.
And I'm just here because his life is awesome.
I love that answer. Thank you. Shelley and Fran, do you guys want to go next?
Okay, I'm Shelley. I'm
sorry, I accidentally muted you, Sheldon. Please keep unmute yourself and keep going. My apologies.
So my first surgery was 1953, and I've had about 6 or 7 surgeries altogether. And I'm still in one piece, thanks to my partner here, Fran.
I'm Fran, and I'm his personal support worker. And without me, he wouldn't be who he is.
There we go.
Beautiful. Thank you both. Okay, now turning to the folks in the room, I'll let you introduce your name and a little bit about yourself.
Hi, I'm Jamie, and I was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis in 2009, and I got my ostomy in 2013, made permanent in 2019, and I've been on the steering committee for about 12 years now. Also big into the buddy program, which I am a huge advocate and support person for. I love traveling and eating and doing all kinds of really fun things. So happy to answer any of your questions.
Hi, I'm Sue. I've had Crohn's for 48 years now. I was diagnosed in 1976 at Sick Kids. I have a permanent ostomy now. I had it 5 years ago, and I got my ostomy surgery 11 years ago, and I'm in remission for 11 years now. So if you have any other questions, don't hesitate to ask. Thank you.
Hi, my name is John Bear. I had my first ileostomy made and last one in 1979. And then in 1999, I had an ilioanal pouch. Been living for 25 years with the pouch. Threw in some marathons there and ran all over the world, and still in practice as a chiropractor and traveling a bit and busy, busy, busy. So life is good. And I owe it all to my wife, who's not here today, but Marjorie is the reason I'm still here. Thank you.
Great, thank you to all of our panelists. And here now, in honor of National Truth and Reconciliation Day, I'm gonna do a land acknowledgement from being at Mount Sinai in downtown Toronto. And I want to acknowledge that we are on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, and the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. So with that, we're going to encourage you to start to percolate on some of those burning questions that you have. But to start us off, we've actually got a question that's already come in for Jamie. And we're going to say, you know, if you're newly diagnosed or if your disease has been evolving, how do you start to share this with those who are important in your life? Whether that be perhaps an employer, because you're needing an accommodation, a romantic partner, friends, family. So often what people say is they need care and support. This is not something you can do alone. And a lot of that comes outside of your formal medical team. So what kind of advice do you have to read people in and tell them what kind of support they can be offering you?
Thanks. I think this is a very important topic, and I'm going to be very broad, but by all means, feel free to put your hand up and ask any questions if you want to dive into anything more specific, or we can take that offline and talk about it later. But I think that first and foremost, this comes down to like a very personal inside decision, and you don't have to share anything with anybody that you're not comfortable with. So please don't feel pressure to have to share with people that you're not comfortable with. By all means, you're allowed to set your own boundaries. You're allowed to say no. And whatever comes with that, please don't feel any pressure. And if you do, reach out to anyone on our steering committee and we can help guide you through whatever that process might look like. And when it comes to, from my own personal experiences, I have found in being not necessarily diagnosed young when I was in my early 20s, that was a little bit easier to kind of come to terms with. It was when I had my first surgery that I really was like, how am I going to deal with this change in my body? What is that going to look like for me? How is it going to change the way that I show up for the people that I care about? How is it going to be impacted in my work, in my relationships, being in my mid-20s and single and new to the city? So that was scary. I was starting a new job. That was scary. I didn't know how I was going to travel with, you know, this ostomy attached to my body. That was scary. So you're entering into a lot of unknowns. So, you know, you have to kind of get to a place internally where you're able to lean in. So I think from an inside perspective, experimenting with products can be a great place to start to get yourself really secure and understand, you know, yourself before you're more outward sharing. And truth be told, when I went to work, I didn't tell my employers for 2 years that I had an ostomy. So I don't know if you find comfort in knowing that I went to the office every single day and nobody knew I had an ostomy. Not one person. I just went to work just like everybody else. And it wasn't until I was really comfortable, I think it was at a conference, when I was just like, oh yeah, my ostomy. And everyone's like, what's an ostomy? And that kind of allowed me having time to adjust and adapt and be comfortable with the people that I was able to open up. So again, don't feel obligated to have to share. That said, that's not necessarily the best approach. I know, you know, sometimes there's going to be more sense of urgency and you have to share. So make sure you're just, when you are sharing with the right people, whether that's HR or someone that you can trust. So that's really important. And then when it comes to relationships, I have tried many theories over the last decade. Many theories, many practices, many trial and error, many embarrassing conversations, a few embarrassing stories. We'll be happy to share those offline too. But it really does come down to the more honest you are. And I think vulnerability is something that's becoming, you know, really, really important in where we are in this time, in this world, in this place. The more I was comfortable with myself and then able to open up, the more I realized this disease isn't as invisible as we think that it is. And it was shocking to me how many people were like, oh, my aunt, my sister, my cousin, my brother, my somebody. So there was kind of a way to relate that made me feel a little less insecure as I was starting to open up for the first time and kind of figuring out how I wanted to let people know that I had this ostomy, as opposed to just being like, oh, I'm trying to make jokes and making it funny. It could become more serious, but that also comes with time and experience. And, you know, for somebody that, you know, maybe is in their age doesn't even matter. For somebody that's dealing with this for the first time, it is terrifying. And that is just kind of the reality of the situation. So I can stand here bravely making jokes today, but when I look back, it really was hard and scary and intimidating. You have to find internal strength to get there. But being sick versus having an ostomy, there's just so much gratitude and happiness and excitement that I wasn't sick anymore, that I really let that be my driver when I found the voice to be able to communicate the changes in my body and what I was experiencing and what I wanted my life to be moving forward, and not letting the disease define who I was as a person in my core, or how I wanted to live, or what I wanted to do. So if any of that helps in any way, I see a hand up.
Cool, thanks, Jamie. And again, if you've got any more specific questions on things that Jamie's just dove into, feel free to send them in. Sonia, I see you've got your hand up and you've thrown a question in the chat. Feel free to unmute yourself if you'd like to ask the question directly. Otherwise, if you would rather, I can read out what you've written in the chat.
Yeah, thank you so much. Actually, I didn't even know this was going on. I just saw my email, so this is my first time joining you guys. Yeah, so my name is Sonia Mao, and I got diagnosed with FAP. So and I just got my surgery done September 5th of this year. So I have a very, very fresh stoma. And my question here is basically, I'm a bit overwhelmed by the barrier fit. I'm really crafty, so the whole arts and craft part got the hands down. Sticking part got the hands down. It's just the barrier ring fit around the stoma, because I have home care nurses, and even I went to other nurses too after being discharged, and they tell me, some people say 4 millimeter, you want the gap between the stoma and the barrier ring to be 4 millimeters. Some people say 2 millimeters. And right now it got to the point where, especially where my mouth is right now, at the bottom of my stoma, where, you know, all the fluid will come out besides just the regular, you know, liquid poo stool will come out from the center. That keeps coming out, of course. That's normal for a fresh stoma, but it's basically making it very raw. And I tried a crusting technique. I'm trying everything I can. I've been changing my plate plus the bag almost every day, sometimes even twice a day, because the burning sensation is so strong that, funny enough, the incision is actually not that bad. That's so crazy to say. I can actually walk around, go up the stairs, you know, on my second week, I was fine. And then the more raw my skin around my stoma, I'm currently talking to you, I will admit, I'm currently talking to you lying on the couch, and because I'm trying to keep the weight off of the bag pulling on my raw skin, especially because I have the ring on top. So I'm just wondering, besides, like, how do you know what's the right fit? Because I watch on YouTube a lot of videos actually, and people, their stoma are now stabilized. They're thicker skin too, so they can keep their barrier ring really tight to their stoma, and they seem to look really great skin. And I'm just like, okay, what's the right fit for a fresh stoma?
Sure.
And also, like, besides a crusting technique, would a protective sheet work better to protect all the bile and acidic liquid coming out the output?
Yeah.
Like, sorry, it is quite long-winded.
No, we hear you, Sonia.
overwhelming.
It's a huge adjustment that you're going through, certainly, and making sure you've got supplies that can adjust as you adjust through the healing process is vital. So John's gonna offer some insights here. Oh, sorry, Jamie's we will answer some insights here, but thank you for the question, and welcome to the world of a stoma.
Thank you. Oh, and I have a irregular shape stoma too.
Oh, muted. Hi. Hi. Sorry, me again. I remember this. I remember this very clearly. I remember the itching. I remember the burning. I remember the feeling of trying to like pull the adhesive off for the first time. It's definitely an adjustment. It takes time for your skin to get used to not being able to breathe. Like I feel like the hair follicles need to die. It's so itchy, all of those things. So I would recommend a few different things. So first, I would go on to the Hollister and Coloplast websites and order everything. Call somebody, they'll send you everything you could imagine for free so that you can test all the products. And once you've tested all the products, there might be some that you find less or more irritating than others. I think taking it off the flange regularly too will create a lot of an irritant, and you want to do that as little as possible. I was also recommended in the early days that less is more, so like avoiding ointments and powders and all of those things. The Coloplast sheet, what I do and what I've done and what I still do to this day is I actually take the protective barrier and I cut a hole in it the size of my stoma, and that is the first barrier sheet that I put against my skin, and then I put the flange on top, and then I put the pouch on top, and it acts as like a protective layer between your flange and your skin. And in that case, like in the winter months, I could get away with like 10 days if I'm lazy. So it really, really is sticky,
Wow.
and it's like it has been my saving grace. I started with the moldable ring. It didn't last as long, but that protective sheet cut to the exact size of the stoma that you want is amazing. Getting it off, get the Convatec adhesive strip remover, and that stuff works like magic. I also have a video that I created with all of those products, so I can send that to you if you want to take a look at it.
Yeah, that would be perfect. Thank
Yeah,
you.
I'll have Brenda put us in touch.
Thank you. And can I ask a quick question? Oh, sorry.
Sonia, sorry, before we get to your second question, we're just going to have Kevin also share some insights there, and then we'll get back to you just a second.
Thank you.
Just one quick thing, Sonia, you may want to try a strip paste or a tube paste. The paste goes on around your stoma before you put your flange on, and it'll take up a lot of extra space. You could try that.
Okay. Okay. Do I still need to leave a gap? Like between my stoma and like my bare skin next to it? Like, I guess that's the part I'm confused about.
Well, the paste will fill that, Sonia.
Oh, okay.
Like the idea is to try and have your flange cut as tight to your stoma as possible, not like cutting off circulation or anything, but kind of up to the edge of it. And the paste, either strip paste or the paste that's in a tube, it looks like toothpaste. You put that around your skin and stoma. I mean, again, if you were to ask Coloplast or any of the companies that manufacture the products, they'll totally explain how to use it and what it's best for.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Shelley, it looks like you wanted to add some perspective as well. Please go for it.
I just wanted to get back to what Jamie said about letting your employer know about your condition. I would say as a lawyer, it's very important to let your employer know right away. And the reason is, in my situation, it actually was a huge benefit because when they terminated me, they had to give me a bigger settlement than they ordinarily would give. And that's all due to them knowing that, they're dealing with someone who has a serious medical condition. So by all means, let your employer know that you have the condition. Very, very important from a legal perspective.
Okay, thanks.
Sonia, did you say you had a second question, or did we feel like we've kind of answered things wholly for you at the moment?
The only other one question I had was actually the protective sheet. I was wondering, so when you say cut the protective sheet to be as close to your stoma, so does that mean it has to be flush against the stoma? Like, don't leave any gap, like not even 3 millimeters or something like that? That's all I was curious about too.
There's your audio.
Hi, I just wanted to let you know, with a protective sheet, don't let it too close to your stoma because it could cut it. Another thing you could use is I use 2 rings on my stoma and then put the flange on in the bag. And that seems to protect it too from leaking. It helps a lot. Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you so much.
Great, thanks for your question, Sonia. We've got another question here just going in a bit of a different direction, and Sue's actually going to answer this one for us. We have lots of passionate travelers in this group, folks who have traveled lots before, now are wanting some top tips when traveling with what can be sometimes a pretty unpredictable disease or a J pouch or stoma. What are some tips so that that love of wanderlust can continue, Sue?
Okay.
Hi, a lot of people with ostomies are really nervous about traveling. In June, I went to Italy and I found this very useful. It's from the Toronto Airport, Pearson Airport. They have something called the Sunflower Program, and it's globally recognized symbol for non-visible disabilities. It indicates to airport staff that they may need support and or assistance and just a little bit more time. What they'll give you, it's called a lanyard and it's got sunflowers on it. And what you do is you wear this around your neck when you go to the airport, and the staff will assist you with anything. Even when you go through security, it helps you get through easier. And another thing is bring on a carry-on bag with you onto the plane. You're allowed medical supplies. And in it, I have my ostomy supplies, my medication, extra clothes just in case you need it, wipes, sweater, toothbrush, and toothpaste, because sometimes the planes get delayed. Well, then a lot of the times. PJs and your meds, and look to see where your ostomy supplies are in the country that you're going to. Like in Italy, I looked it up and one was close to Rome and another one is close to Florence. Okay? Don't let the ostomy control your life. You control it. Live your life. It's a second chance. You're capable to do anything you want. Don't let the ostomy stop you.
Sue, those are some great tips. Thank you. As a passionate traveler myself, I just want to compliment what you said, is that as different points when my Crohn's was, I didn't introduce myself at the beginning. My name is Kim and I have had Crohn's for a little more than 20 years and a permanent stoma now for nearly 2 years. And I loved to travel when I had only the Crohn's, I'll say, even though that's not really an only. And based on whether or not the Crohn's was really active, whether I was in a flare, I would adjust the kind of travel I did. So for example, as opposed to like riding the trains in India or doing something backpacking and adventurous, I chose, say, a cruise to Antarctica. And that meant that I had my own room. The activities were only a few hours long. If I was having a bit of a harder day, I could stay back from the morning activity and still have my own bathroom on board. It was a smaller ship. So it meant that more factors were within my control, even though I appreciate Antarctica is like as far away as you can go. It also really helped to have a friend who I was really open with, so that if throughout the trip, say like Italy, for example, or Portugal, I was not feeling great or I was a little worried about my hydration levels, I knew I had someone I could count on and that who would be flexible in adjusting for the itinerary based on what my disease was saying day by day. So definitely consider it, thank you, but you just gotta take it into account like you would the weather, like you would building an itinerary, any of those other logistics. Shelley, I saw your hand up as well, please continue.
I just want to echo your comments. I think cruises are a very important choice for people with any kind of medical disability. You can let the staff on the ship know, what kind of accommodation you need. You can even contact head office of the cruise company ahead of time so that staff on the ship are aware. And we've done a lot of traveling. And we've been everywhere on cruise ships. The biggest criticism of cruise ships is you get to a good place for a day. And that is a very valid criticism. What we do whenever we go on a cruise is we do like a land trip before the cruise starts and one at the end. So we combine the cruise, which is one day, one stop, with focusing on a good start and end place to stay a little bit longer. And that's a great way to travel. It really is.
Awesome. Thank you, Shelley. Love that. Great advice. Absolutely. We've got a new question here from Sarah that I'm going to read out. I've been recently diagnosed with UC, and I'm still in a flare with moderate to severe inflammation. I'm sorry about that. My first GI told me to avoid pretty much all fiber, including raw foods and veggies, no nuts or seeds, no leafy greens, etc., until I'm healed. My new or current GI said that once things have calmed down, I can eat more or less anything. But I see online a lot of people say diet matters. I'm afraid to eat certain things now, and my diet isn't the greatest. I also have type 2 diabetes, so what I'm eating now to help the UC calm down is like the polar opposite of what I should be eating for my type 2 diabetes. In your experience, how important is diet? Is this worth seeking out an IBD dietitian? And John's going to help us with this one here.
All right.
Okay. Hi, it's John Bear here. And I got the reflection. Are you muted? Okay. Yeah, it's a very difficult situation when you have the flare up and it's new, and the diets are so many other. I've got a patient who did the Goichel diet and it helped him. He was 27 and he cleared everything up on his own. Others tried all kinds of different diets. It depends on your particular nature and your immune system. I've always advocated with my patients exercise. So that's not the diet, but exercising along with correct choices, and you'll find out what choices help you will be the best way to calm this down. If you start exercising at whatever level you can do, and it's fun for you, keep doing that. That's so important to help the immune system fight this disease. And also, you're finding certain foods, like for me, certain tomatoes bother me. I've had a ileoanal pouch for 25 years. Then I have to be careful with certain spicy foods and whatnot. That's what I found out worked. And when I eat cleaner and I back into my exercising and starting jogging again, I just feel so much better. So it's not an easy situation. I think it's something you have to learn to work with. And yeah, just keep trying to find out what works for you, find out what aggravates things. But if you can get, are you active in physically at all?
Sarah had just typed this into the chat, so we don't want to force her to speak if she doesn't feel comfortable. But thank you for the encouragement of physical activity. We've got a few hands. Before, Shelley, we get to you, we'd actually love to, there's a support that we have within the program here, Sarah, that we wanted to make sure you were aware of. So Brenda's going to offer a comment, and Shelley will come over to you.
Okay. Hi, Sarah. Just we do have an outpatient dietitian. Bonnie Wong is her name. And your GI or your surgeon, if you're at Mount Sinai, can make a referral, or I can make a referral as well. You can always reach out to me, and she can do a virtual meeting or an in-person meeting. But oftentimes, our dietitians will ask you to keep a food diary for a week or two to see what aggravates or settles things down. Okay, but if you have any questions about that, I can put you in touch with someone as well. And we're hoping we can have our dietitian do a talk this year for us as well.
But given the sensitivity that you're managing two really important diseases, and of course your insulin levels are really important to manage, I would strongly recommend the recommendation of speaking to someone who can account for both. Shelley, to you, and then over to Kevin and Wendy.
So as the cook in the house, one of the two times Shelley ended up with a blockage in the hospital, it was after a salad bar. So raw vegetables and actually raw fruit doesn't really work well for him. Now, this is unique for each person, so you have to figure out what works for you. He can tolerate cooked vegetables. So for tonight, for example, we had a stir fry, but I get most of the vegetables and he just gets a sampling. So he stays away from salads. He stays away from raw vegetables. And at this point, he kind of knows what he can't and can't have. He does cheat. So when I'm not looking, he'll grab a handful of walnuts or almonds. I have said if he ends up in the hospital, I won't come to visit. So that's about the only threat I can
Is that
offer.
a threat or?
Tough love from Fran over here. I will say,
So
on some of those
because I
points-
do the cooking, and if we go to restaurants, I'm there to go through the menu. We avoid raw vegetables and raw fruits, and he's got lactose intolerance, so that as well is something he has to deal with. And we've managed to travel, and he's certainly put on weight, so he's not starving. And you just figure out what works for you. And as far as exercise, Shelley's the one who got me into spinning, and then he stopped spinning. So we now have a routine where after dinner, I make him walk, and we walk as much as possible. And he had acid reflux, and that stopped. So exercise, I'm a real fan of exercise personally, and I think for everything and anything. And something as simple as clearing your head. And if you have a bad day, you put on a pair of running shoes and you go for a walk, even if it's just around the block. And that works wonders. And it's probably one of the best things Shelley's been doing and not complaining about acid reflux.
She's
Couldn't agree more. A simple
she's
walk.
an excellent spinner.
Kevin and Wendy, over to you.
Yeah, Sarah, just one thing I would suggest, since you're type 2, I'm type 2 myself, and I have an excellent person that controls what goes in my body. However, I might suggest reaching out to your local diabetes clinic. I mean, most every area has one, and they have their own dietitians as well. They could perhaps help you with the type 2 diabetic half of your equation. They have nurses there as well. I don't know if you're on meds or anything, but they can certainly help with that too. So that could be an option for you as well.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Wonderful. We're going to throw to another question here, but before we do, the person I'd love to answer this joined us after we had finished your introduction. So Barbara, I'd love if you could just unmute yourself for a moment, give us the headline of who you are and the perspective you bring as being on the panel today, and then I've got a question for you.
Hello, everybody. People who have been around this group as long as I have know that I've had Crohn's since I was diagnosed at 21. So I've had Crohn's now for 55 years. It's been a long haul, and I call myself a Crohn's veteran. I've had 5 resections. I've had many medications over the years. Right now I'm on Stelara. My son also, my older son, was diagnosed when he was 8 and is now 51. We think of each other as cronies. David lives in LA. He's the director of animated features, the author of 2 books. His books are focused on a boy who has Crohn's disease, and he has excellent doctors. So between the doctors he has and the doctors I've had in Toronto, I think we have some pretty terrific care for Crohn's. I've worked in order to get past all of the difficulties in the first 20 years. I started a PhD in arts and museum education, and I graduated in 1990 at University of Toronto. I was teaching until 6 years ago when I retired, and I'm an independent consultant. I've worked across Canada, the US, and the UK. So I found ways to overcome some of the horrific things that I've had to experience and to stay positive.
Wonderful. Thanks, Barbara. Great to hear a little bit about your background and perspective. The question we wanted to throw to you today is somehow already it's the end of September. I'm not quite sure where the month has gone. October is upon us, fall is upon us. And with that change of season, I'd love to get your perspective on how do you think ahead? How do you prepare ahead for the fall, for the winter, for that change of season, to really set yourself up for success, particularly knowing we're going into a season where a bunch of different airborne diseases tend to be more prevalent.
Things that I thought of that people might want to ask about. I think we all have to worry about COVID still, and COVID protection, and flu protection, RSV, immunizations. I've had every COVID shot possible because I just don't trust that I won't get it. Nutrition is important, diet changes. If you need to change your nutrition over the next year, as has already been said, it's important to talk to a dietitian or nutritionist. Do you have to think of medication changes? There are new medications all the time, and it's well worth changing if your medication isn't working. Do you have to think about that? Fitness, we've already talked about, is really important outdoors and indoors. What else? Work changes, whether you're working paid work or unpaid work. It really helps to keep your mind going if when your body's in trouble. So have you thought about changes? Do you have to think about changes to your work? And the other thing is learning. I'm an educator, so learning is paramount for me, both online and in person, and more online. So those are some thoughts. If anybody has questions or other ideas about the next year and things that you have to think about, please ask.
Great, thank you, Barbara, appreciate it. Something that I think is quite unique and special to the support program offered here at Sinai, and its affiliated hospitals, is the buddy program. And this actually first got introduced to me a day or two before I had my stoma surgery, but I wasn't in the headspace to really understand it until I was actually discharged from the hospital and beginning my recovery at home. And I have found it to be invaluable as I went from recovery Kim back into fully successful life, thriving Kim, to have someone that I could ask questions of that weren't appropriate for one of the medical professionals in my life. So I'd actually love the team to talk a little bit more about the program so that anyone here who might be thinking that they would like some extra support, particularly if they're facing an upcoming surgery, or perhaps they've already had the surgery and they weren't thinking about a buddy at the time, but are starting to think about some of those more life-based questions. Wanted to make sure we had a few minutes to really explore what it is and how it can show up in different people's lives. So Jamie, I think, John's going to start us off and we'll get a few different perspectives here.
Hi, so having had an ileostomy for 20 years, certainly knowing how that affects my life, the buddy program really is set up beautifully for me. When I get the email from Brenda and she's talking about, can you connect with this person? I'll usually phone them as soon as I can. 90% of them get back to me, and I can give them my perspective on having had the ileostomy for 20 years and then making the decision against the gastroenterologist at the time, saying, oh, you've had your ileostomy, you're well appropriated. I don't really think you should get an ileoanal pouch. You just get the rest of your bowel taken out. And I thought, well, you haven't had to live with this for 20 years and kneel down 6 times a day and empty the pouch, and you haven't had to change it twice a week. And I was appreciative of what it did, and it saved my life, but my decision was to go with Dr. Robin McLeod's suggestion that this was the gold standard, that we could help you get back to becoming incontinent. So I give that perspective too. And for 25 years, I've had that ileostomy. I had the courage to start jogging. It led to really changing my life, doing 23 marathons around the world, keeping physically fit. And I'm still in active practice as a chiropractor today, 48 years later. So, and I tell the buddies, that's the decision I made. And I leave it with, I think the decision you make will be the right one. So go with what your gut tells you, literally and figuratively. And this is what worked for me. This is what helped me get through in my life. And I think that's also what I share with some patients that I think can take it. For me, helping them understand that to inspire others and to make them stronger through whatever happens to them is the key to what I found in life. So the Bowel Buddy situation really works well, I think. Don't you, Brenda? Yeah.
I could jump on too, to John's point. I'm the polar opposite decision. So it just being so specific to each person, I was of the mindset, like, if it's not broke, don't fix it. Is that the right saying? Because I was living such a great life with my ostomy. It gave me so much freedom. I just was so happy with it that when the opportunity was presented to try the pouch, I was like, I don't know. I don't know what that, I don't know. And just as someone who had experienced being sick and didn't want to go back to that place, I decided to make mine permanent, and that's, you know, what worked for me. So you've got two examples sitting side by side. And I think what John said holds true is that, you know, you get an opportunity to make some of these decisions, and you can connect with somebody who is going through, has gone through what you are facing, and to have somebody to talk to outside of just the medical team who actually can sit there and say, yeah, I get it, is really beneficial. So if you have been sitting on the fence about wanting to talk to somebody or a few different people with different perspectives, then I highly encourage you to reach out to our team.
Yeah. So anyone else, we've gone through some of the questions that had come in ahead of time. We've answered what's in the chat. Wanted to really ensure that anyone else who has a burning question today, feel free, throw your hand up now. We'll give it another minute or two to throw things in the chat if that makes you more comfortable. Otherwise, I also wondered if, yeah, Kevin or Wendy, I actually would love to hear from you. It sounds like, Kevin, you want something to share, but I was also curious if you've got anything you wanted to complement to what Jamie shared at the top around support in your own life. Now, of course, you guys have each other, which is wonderful, but for someone like me who's single, how can I best read in my friends so that I still have support on days where I'm needing to look to others? Is there a way, Kevin, that you've shared your life experience with others, or have I totally thrown you on the spot?
Yeah, no, good question, Kim. And I think, I mean, my first surgery was, oh my God, 30 years ago, I guess. So 93, our support groups and Buddy and things like that were totally in its infancy. So I kind of went through it on my own. However, I was never on my own because I had Wendy, I had a great family support, I had a fantastic group of friends as support, like extended family, coworkers, friends. And I'm probably one of those people who has little or no shyness. So I would tell anyone that wanted to know what I was going through or what I had gone through and what an ileostomy is. And, you know, as was previously mentioned, I believe it's like, you know, oh yeah, I know someone who has that, or oh, my uncle, my best friend, whatever. I think just being open is probably one of the best ways for us to get support. And that's a big step to take, especially for someone who is suffering and is probably at one of their lowest points in their life with a disease, to sit down and start pouring your heart out to people that maybe are just outside your immediate circle. But it does pay off in great dividends because the support comes back to you, which is really what we'd be looking for, I think. I hope that kind of answered it a little bit.
I appreciate that. Thank you for letting me throw you on the spot there, Kevin. Another question here from Sonia, which is great. John's going to answer this one for us. Are there any foods that you'd recommend that would help make the output less acidic? Perhaps, for example, rice.
Well, you know, my wife told me this morning that I should have some oatmeal, and I did. And the butter tart had to stay to the side. So that's true confessions. Yeah, I mean, that I find tomatoes are very acidic for me. So just soluble fiber, things that'll kind of bulk up the stool, and that helps get it through. If you start, you know, if you drink alcohol, it's too acidic and inflammatory. Smoking also creates acidity. So, you know, all the good things that we all love to do or did at one time, probably in moderation or less, and that will help to ease up that acidity. But it's important for you to consult a dietitian, find out what's working for you. Certain things might work for one person and not for you. It's just like getting the ileostomy size right and getting the stoma size right. I used to have a Dremel that I'd have to cut it out and get it just right. And very often it was still burning in the beginning. So you're finding out through your diet, you're finding out through what's working for you, over time. And having had that ileostomy for 20 years was a long time to learn about what worked and what didn't work. And I had a long time to figure out what worked dietarily. And even if I cheated a little bit, I felt that the acidity was lessened when I would go out and have my jog or have my run. It just, everything felt better when I did that. So, I mean, it's not a be all and end all, but that's what worked for me. Soluble fiber. Have your own.
Sue, do you want to compliment that?
There you go.
Okay, when I first got my ostomy, I had a really high output. So what I did for probably about 2 or 4 years, I had a book and I would write daily what I had for breakfast, lunch, and dinner and what I drank. And then like after a week, I would find out what was causing the high output. So I eat a lot of pasta, potatoes, starches like that. That helps a lot. I stay away from spicy food because that really acts it up. But everybody's different. You can also check out some books on Crohn's and colitis. There's recipes out that you could try. Okay, thank you.
And I'll just make a second plug that we do have this nutritionist for those who are patients here at Sinai. I'm sure most hospitals, or I would hope most hospitals, would have a resource like that. So even if you don't have the complicating factor of a second ailment or disease, feel free to reach out to your GI, feel free to reach out to Brenda, and we can make that referral as well. Omar, I would love to invite you to ask your question. And Barbara, I'm going to forecast that I'm going to hope that perhaps you can lead us off with an answer, and then anyone else who wants to join can as well.
Hey, how's it going, guys? Yeah, my question was like, one thing I kind of struggle with is that when I'm having like an anxious day, or if I'm going through a period of stress, like, I mean, honestly, like I think every day there's highs and lows in terms of stress and stuff like that. I feel like sometimes you go through a period of time where you'll be using the bathroom more. And one thing I struggle with is that it's hard then to determine, if that's a flare or if that's just, you being anxious. And so one of my challenges I have is, how to basically almost delineate the two so that I'm not creating this vicious cycle where it's like, oh, I'm using the bathroom more or I'm nervous, and then they kind of feed off each other. So I guess I'm, obviously, things like, I guess what I'm more interested, I guess I'm interested to hear how others deal with stress, anxiety, the normal things of life, and also like how they and their bowels basically.
Barbara, would you like to start us off here with some insights?
Yeah, that's tough, Omar, because I find that because my bowel is more irritable than it should be, the irritableness of the bowel makes me nervous. And basically anything that I have that's new in terms of a physical ailment or something that's different than I've had before makes me nervous, which makes my bowel take off. So I'm not sure that it's flare as much as it's the disease itself that causes the anxiety and fatigue, and having to go to the bathroom more. So it's really difficult. I mean, flare happens when I've had flare, I've wound up in emergency when it's really serious. But from day to day, I'm nervous anyway. I'm finding I'm a nervous person. And the older I get, the more nervous I get. And the more nervous I get, the more bowel movements I have. So it's challenging.
Omar, you are muted. Did you want to just say that again?
No, I think that's an honest answer, and I appreciate that. I feel like with people with IBD, there's just a general level of in the back of your mind because of the trauma you've been through that there's always like we all have had really traumatic experiences because of it may have been 10 years or 20 years ago for some people, but that trauma is still there and it's still a wound that can be opened at any time. So if I'm like, let's just say for today, for example, I had an amazing day. I had a good day at work, exercise, this, that, like perfectly fine day, but then there's if you have like a bad hour or 2 hours, psychologically your brain can go places, and it's like and so it's just something we have to live with. So I guess as everybody in the call is saying, having these good habits, like, trying to eat well or meditate or exercise or talk to people you care about, like, it's just, I guess that at the end of the day, it's something we have to live with, and it doesn't go away. You know what I mean? And I guess that's the long and the short of it, I guess.
Well, it doesn't go away, but on top of that, I'm finding that as I get older, it's getting harder.
Okay.
So, that doesn't help either, but that's actually where things are at. I mean, there's so much in the past that has accumulated
Yeah.
that I can't let it go. And I find that nervousness is part of my life, and I don't want it,
Yeah.
but it's there. So I've tried meditation. I try exercise. I try to control it. But I'm thrown really easily.
Yeah, no, I respect you sharing that, and that's something which is part of my existence as well. Is that's always something I think about. So, we're in it together, Barbara.
Okay, well, that's good to know. It helps. Good.
Shelley, do you want to add in here? Barbara, thank you for that candor.
Yeah, I think go back to the dietitian issue. The longer you live with the condition, the more you'll learn which foods cause more output. So if you're expecting a busy day at work with meetings or whatever, you can adjust your diet for that day because you know which foods or liquids are going to cause more output. So because otherwise it's a vicious cycle. If you just eat the way you want without regard to what causes more output, then the cycle will continue. You'll have more output, you'll get more nervous, and around the merry-go-round you'll go.
If I may, something that I look back on in my earlier years through my 20s with Crohn's, I lived not in a healthy way. I am not advocating this, but I pretended I didn't have my Crohn's. So especially anytime I was in a high functioning, high travel, high stress, high demand job that I loved, but I at no point thought to stand up for me and for the boundaries I needed to reduce some of that anxiety and say, I'm sorry, either I can't or I need accommodation, and provide some of that context to an employer within reason in order to make sure that I wasn't unduly putting myself in situations that would provide even more anxiety and continue that unvirtuous cycle. So I would certainly say that's where some candor and making sure that folks are aware, or even with friends, I would find I'd get invited certain places and would just not think to state what I needed. And then the entire time I was riddled with anxiety or running to a bathroom or being put in really uncomfortable situations. Whereas later when I started to really own and come to the reality that I've got this, it's not going anywhere, by simply starting to say, yes, and I need this accommodation, instead of going here, can we go there? That started to put me back in control of what I could do in a way that felt safe is the wrong word, but protected or in better control, which started to reduce a little bit of that anxiety. But John, do you want to add something? Then we've got a final question that's just 2 questions that have come in here that'll wrap our day.
Well, the flare for me having a ileoanal pouch was pouchitis, and in the 25 years I might have had it 3 or 4 times, and going on the antibiotic helped calm it down. Having run the marathons, and I've done 23 of them, as I mentioned, I would have it so that I could hydrate, use my electrolytes, never have to go to the washroom because I didn't eat a lot beforehand, and I could do the 4-hour marathon without having to go to the washroom. When I ran Boston, top of Heartbreak Hill, I had to use the washroom, found my pain meds, kept going. But I think having that balance, and depending on what you have, really causes you to understand what's the difference between a flare and just what you're having a tough day. Today I had like 15 patients. One of them was really, really bummed out, and I tried to calm things down. At the end, I just shared my story with him, and he realized he wasn't alone in his own situation, and that I think that we're here to inspire and help others. So that's how we can decompress by also helping others. It really is great to share the story.
Couldn't agree more. That's why we're here. Jamie, did you, or no? So last question here. Sarah, it's a great question you ask. I'm sure you are not alone in this. It's something that I certainly have dealt with. And as I read it, would love to just look at our panelists to raise your hand if who would like to answer this final question for us today. But do you have any advice on how to deal with friends or family who just don't understand how sick I am and that this is a serious disease? I've opened up to some friends and family and have had just a few kind of brush me off or get frustrated with me when I say I can't do something or go somewhere due to no accommodation. Girl, let me say we have all been there. Anyone want to share any perspective or provide some insight, some advice to Sarah here? I'm going to do it. And then Shelley will finish with you as well. I think part of what I found worked here was that for a long time, I didn't really read people into how serious it was because I didn't treat it seriously. And therefore, they didn't treat it seriously. I look back now on some of the situations I was in with my employer or friends, and we're all looking at each other like, how did you possibly do that? And I look back not knowing. And it's because I didn't stand up for the boundaries that I needed. And I think part of that is that there's a far more understanding today of what Crohn's or colitis or J pouch or whatever it is that you're dealing with, Sarah. I forget, I know you shared that with us earlier this evening. And frankly, just read folks into the reality, even though you might get into some of the icky, gross details of it. And also recognize that not everyone is going to want to choose to show up for you. And that's true whether we're talking about the IBD world, whether we're talking about cancer, whether we're talking about Alzheimer's, whether we're talking about a mental health challenge. Some folks just aren't interested in, able to show up to support others. So I think it's important that you are honest and upfront with what it is and what you need, but then also start to recognize who is it that is choosing to meet you where you are with respect, sometimes with interest and curiosity. When I got my stoma, there were a lot of friends who would come over and like kind of reluctantly wonder, can I see what it looks like? And the more that I was just open and upfront, like, this is part of who I am, I'll answer whatever question you had, helped me get more comfortable with part of who I was, but also helped open that laneway for honesty, which means that now if we're out and about and I'm feeling like I need to change my bag, I can mention it to a friend and they're like, yeah, no problem, here's a Starbucks, let's hop inside. But it also went along the way that I lost some friends who weren't interested in having to put up with or deal with the baggage that came with me being their friend. And I'm better for it, for having those around me who have chosen to show up just as I do in moments that they have of struggle or challenge, whether that be disease related or whatever life hands us along the way. So hopefully that helps. But of course, the buddy program, I think, is a really solid way to be able to even practice. What do you say? How do you answer specific questions? What about this kind of scenario? Because we've likely been there as well. But Shelley, did you want to add some perspective just to round us out here for our evening?
I guess you sort of emphasize the right points. I think some people aren't good at handling negative news or negative stories, and they don't really want to get involved or learn too much because they like to avoid negative information. Other people are more understanding, and you know, as you get to the age of Barb and myself and Kevin, you'll realize that at that stage, almost everyone has a medical condition. So at that stage, it's much easier to discuss. It's probably harder to discuss when you're younger, when you have this serious condition and your friends don't. But so just stick to it, be patient, and eventually when you grow older, be easier to talk to people about your condition.
I just want to add to that.
Yeah, go ahead.
And initially, when we were, I guess, newly married or whatever, and after Shelley was diagnosed with Crohn's, we never shared with anyone what he was going through. So if we were supposed to go out on a Saturday night with another couple and he wasn't feeling up to it, we made excuses. We never never provided the information as to why that Shelley was dealing with Crohn's. It was really only after joining the Mount Sinai Support Group that Shelley became a lot more comfortable in being open with other people and just explaining if we had to go to a certain restaurant, that restaurant wasn't suitable for him because it had a salad bar and we'd have problems. I think, as Shelley said, he's more comfortable with explaining to other people because at this point in our lives, everyone around us has something.
Fran, thank you. That's such an important point. Absolutely. And I think, again, it speaks to the fact that there's been a lot more understanding that has come into this space on all diseases, whether they be physical, whether they be mental, over the last 15 or 20 years, in a way that didn't used to be there. It used to be so unspoken that everyone was struggling with these things. So there's a piece of guiding the way, showing your friends what this looks like, because everyone is going to go through baggage at some point, and sometimes you're the leader to help folks see what it means to show up, because rightly so, by the time we're in our 60s, 70s, or 80s, this won't be likely the only ailment that we're dealing with.
And also, unfortunately, Crohn's is becoming more popular and widespread. And that makes it easier to discuss because people might recognize it in a family member or friend.
Absolutely, absolutely.
That's true. And when I was diagnosed with Crohn's, no one had heard anything about it. It was totally new to everyone in my family, to friends. And really, it was for the first 20 years of my having the disease. So things have very much changed. People know much more about Crohn's and colitis than they used to, and there's much more in the media than there was. So that helps us. Doesn't make it easier to live with things, but it helps us a bit.
Certainly, certainly so. Well, as we're here at the top of the hour, Kevin, I'm going to actually wrap us if that's okay. Could you add your comment into the chat, though, so folks can see it before we close here? I do want to just thank all of you for joining us. We've had a really great turnout this evening and are looking forward to our next session. Please circle it on your calendars of November 25th. Topic forthcoming. We didn't want to give all of our cards away this evening, but it should be another great session. And we're always open. So if you've got ideas on specific topics that you'd like a full session on, because we don't want to do AMAs each time, we want to intersperse that with deep dives with specific experts, you're welcome to always send in your suggestions as well. We're eager for those. And then Barb has also put in her email address. So if there are questions that come up later on that you didn't ask today, her email is there. Just recognize that it's at sinaihealth.ca, not the Q at the end of there. That was a typo. And then otherwise, Kevin, thank you for adding your final thought. Omar, appreciate you. And we'll say thank you, everyone, for a great evening. And we'll see you all on November 25th. Bye-bye, everyone. Oh, Omar, how do we get a buddy? Can you email Barb and she will set you up? Brenda, I'm sorry. Oh my
It's
God.
Brenda. Yeah,
I apologize.
that's
Not
okay.
Barb. Don't email Barb. Email Brenda and she'll set you up, Omar. Shelley, yes, how could I help you, sir? Oh, thank you.
Okay, I remember his wife was very pregnant.